Hollywood has long sold itself as a paradise of art and glamour, but for most of the 20th century, that paradise had a velvet rope. White stars walked red carpets while black artists and people of other races were sidelined into servant roles, underpaid and kept out of the parties, yet a handful of legends said no and paid for it. They smashed segregated signs, refused prestigious trophies, funded movements, and spoke out so loudly that studios cut deals, newspapers smeared them, and even the FBI took notes. Consider Marlon Brando, who on March 27, 1973, at the 45th Academy Awards, stunned the hall when, instead of accepting Best Actor for The Godfather, he sent Sachin Little Feather, an Apache activist in traditional dress, to announce he was refusing the Oscar over Hollywood's treatment of Native people. There were cheers, but also boos, a wry smile from Clint Eastwood, and backstage security restraining John Wayne as he tried to rush the stage. It wasn't a whim. Back in 1968, days after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, Brando went to Memphis for the funeral against his manager's advice, was photographed by Life moving quietly among mourners, and beyond symbolism, gave tens of thousands of dollars to legal funds for Black Panther members in Oakland. Harry Belafonte recalled in 1985 that Brando spent late nights in his Harlem apartment plotting fundraisers, and Brando's personal life defied racist taboos. He was photographed leaving Harlem clubs hand in hand and told the BBC in 1973, "I don't see anything to hide in loving someone regardless of their skin color." Studios pulled away, conservative columns cried, "Traitor!" and the FBI watched him. But Brando accepted the boycott if his spotlight could shield those without one. Then there was Elizabeth Taylor, the talking diamond with violet eyes, who in the 1950s decided that whites only wasn't a rule she'd honor. When Sammy Davis Jr. was blocked at the Beverly Hilton in 1958, Taylor took his arm and walked him in, smiling for the cameras as if to say, "He's here, and I'm with him." And when Davis married Mae Britt in 1961 and was disinvited from John F. Kennedy's inaugural festivities, she blasted the slight, "This is not the America I want to live in," and pressured MGM on equal pay, with a 1963 memo later reported showing she threatened to halt Cleopatra for 2 days to force fairness on another set. Decades later, as HIV/AIDS ravaged communities, disproportionately Black and Latinx, she co-founded AMFAR, went on CBS to say, "This is our pain," and raised millions, ignoring whispers that a movie star shouldn't stand in that fight. Paul Newman used charisma like a crowbar, not a mirror. In the summer of 1963, he joined the March on Washington. Caught by life in a white shirt, walking with Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte, donated tens of thousands to Southern voter registration drives, rejected scripts with baked-in bigotry, and during 1967's Cool Hand, Luke phoned producer Jack Lemmon to demand black crew be paid what white crew earned. "I won't work another day if this isn't fixed." And it was fixed the next day. At home in Westport, he hosted gatherings where Belafonte traded stories over drinks and Poitier played cards with young directors. And when neighbors bristled at a black family he rented to, Newman shrugged on CBS, "If they don't like it, they can move." In 1982, he launched Newman's Own, famously giving all profits, eventually hundreds of millions, to charity, much of it benefiting communities the industry overlooked. After his 2008 death, the foundation's direction sparked headlines and family friction by 2020, a coda that showed how even generosity can be contested. Clark Gable, Hollywood's king, used blunt leverage earlier. In 1939, on the Gone with the Wind lot, he found white and colored restroom signs and reportedly told management, "I won't shoot another scene as Rhett Butler if those signs aren't removed," and hours later they were. In 1935, at an Atlanta event for China Seas, when Hattie McDaniel was barred by a whites-only rule, he refused the red carpet. "If Hattie can't go in, I don't need this screening." And though he couldn't topple every wall, McDaniel later said, "Clark never promised to fight for me. He just did." Where one star pushed on sets, Robert Redford tried to rewire the machine. In June 1981, he founded the Sundance Institute in Utah, converting a mountain retreat into a lab for storytellers shut out by the mainstream. We can't brag about being the center of world cinema when half this country never sees themselves on the big screen, he told the Los Angeles Times. And despite 1984 studio pressure and snark in Variety that Sundance was an amateur playground, he doubled down on 60 Minutes in 1983, saying the problem wasn't scripts or money, but the courage to see skin tones other than white. He quietly walked from a 1978 war epic that erased black soldiers, tanking the film. And years later, the Institute would help launch artists from Julie Dash to later voices like Ava DuVernay and Ryan Coogler. Jane Fonda chose the blast furnace, born to privilege. She went on NBC's Today in 1970 to defend philosopher-activist Angela Davis. Then jailed and vilified, Angela is my friend, donated tens of thousands to her bail fund, visited her at Marin County Jail in 1971, and was soon under FBI surveillance with her phone tapped and cars tailing. In 1972, she backed the Black Panthers at a press conference. Variety branded her a traitor, contracts evaporated, and an ex threatened to wield her activism in a custody battle. But she kept marching, from Selma commemorations to Standing Rock decades later, and in a red coat outside Congress in her 70s, reminded everyone that fame can be taken, a voice cannot. Finally, Gregory Peck embodied Atticus Finch on screen and off during 1962's To Kill a Mockingbird when executives sought to soften scenes for Southern markets. He said in Los Angeles, "If you want a safe film, find another actor. I won't play an Atticus Finch stripped of his heart," and the script stayed. On Meet the Press in 1963, he called racial division a malignant tumor in America's soul, quietly sent tens of thousands to bail freedom riders jailed in Jackson in 1961, demanded equal pay for black supporting actors on the Guns of Navarone, and declined an Alabama premiere when black guests were excluded. No rant, just a turned heel that resonated. They were wildly different people, volatile, glamorous, serene, but each risked money, roles, and reputation to pry open a gate Hollywood kept shut, proving that change didn't wait for a memo. It walked in under its own power. Not every rebel gave speeches. Some wrote checks and changed the room. Steve McQueen, the cool king on a motorcycle, heard at a Beverly Hills party in August 1963 that black performers couldn't afford to travel for the march on Washington and told his manager, "Buy them tickets." All of them spending roughly $25,000 to cover travel and lodging. He didn't pose for photos on the mall. He just made sure money wasn't the wall. On 1966's The Sand Pebbles in Taiwan, when he discovered segregated crew housing, he slammed the table. "End this now." And housing was integrated the next day. Later, when a host poked his private life circa 1970, he shrugged on CBS, "I choose who I want, not a skin color." A 9-word manifesto that cost him projects with cautious producers. James Garner left comfort for danger in March 1965, piloting his small plane to Alabama, renting a car, and joining the Selma to Montgomery march directly behind Martin Luther King Jr. No handlers, no press team, then telling Johnny Carson in 1966, "Police are beating innocent people out there. I can't sit at home, drink whiskey, and pretend nothing's happening," even as sponsors of Maverick bristled and studios quietly iced him. He pressed networks to hire black crew, quit a TV project when they refused a black director, and told the Chicago Tribune he'd rather be unemployed than complicit. Tony Curtis, the Bronx kid with the movie star grin, faced the system head-on during 1958's The Defiant Ones, when United Artists fretted about the Southern market and floated dropping Sidney Poitier. Even musing about replacing him with a white actor in makeup, Curtis slammed the table on Sunset Boulevard. "If Sidney doesn't act, then Tony Curtis won't either," walked out, and told Variety he'd withdraw. He also demanded Poitier's name share equal billing on the poster, a public break with the custom of minimizing black co-stars, so the one sheet ultimately printed both names side by side. The film exploded and both men received Best Actor nominations. Curtis heard he'd lose bookings below the Mason-Dixon line and saw projects wobble. But Poitier later said on 60 Minutes, "Without Tony, I would not have had the career I do today. If that was courage inside the studio gates, John Seberg showed what resistance outside the gates could cost. The breathless icon supported Black Panther community programs in the early 1970s, spoke to the Los Angeles Times about their work, and even wore a Panther tee at a presser, making herself a target for J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO. In 1970, the FBI planted a lie that the father of her unborn child was a Panther. Tabloids from the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner to Paris scandal sheets ran it. Paparazzi staked out the hospital, hoping to prove the rumor. Her baby died shortly after birth, and the Washington Post later revealed the Bureau called its smear a successful psychological campaign. Seberg spiraled, sleeping pills, alcohol, paranoia that phones were tapped and rooms bugged. Directors avoided her. And on August 30th, 1979, she was found dead in her car in Paris at 40, officially a suicide, but remembered by Le Monde and the New York Times as a victim of character assassination. Dennis Hopper, branded Hollywood's wild man, turned a camera on prejudice itself. Easy Rider in 1969 shot in real southern towns, capturing genuine glares, curses, and beatings. Keep rolling. This is the real America, he told the cameraman. Then in 1971, he made The Last Movie, cast an Afro-Peruvian lead despite pressure to whitewash, and eviscerated Hollywood's exploitation of native culture, drawing boos in Venice, and shoots himself in the foot headlines in Variety. Contracts collapsed. Studios labeled him persona non grata. And after he attended Panther fundraisers and blasted police brutality on a late-night show, "You want me to talk about movies while cops are beating people?" The whispers said the FBI watched him, whether or not they did. He scraped by on small roles for nearly a decade, until 1986's Blue Velvet, when he said, "I've lost many battles, but I never bowed my head," and audiences remembered why truth-telling scares gatekeepers. And Shirley MacLaine, fresh off The Apartment, stepped into Mississippi during 1964's Freedom Summer, living with a black family in Jackson, while KKK trucks idled at night and a burning cross flared a few hundred meters away. By day, she knocked doors urging voter registration, drawing attention from local authorities, the FBI, and the Jackson Clarion-Ledger. In 1968, at the Democratic National Convention, she blasted police violence from the stage, "This is not the America I believe in," and paid with rumors, threats, and fewer roles, but kept the memory that sometimes a famous white face at your table can keep the night a little safer. Put together, these 13 stories form a ledger of cost, lost contracts, stalker headlines, surveillance files, canceled premieres, and in one case, a life, but also a map of how gates finally opened. The king, who tore down a colored sign in 1939, the actress who linked arms at the Beverly Hilton in 1958, the godfather who refused a 1973 Oscar, the blue-eyed matinee idol who gave 1982 salad dressing profits to strangers, the golden boy who built a mountain refuge in 1981, the cool writer who wrote checks in 1963, the TV star who walked Selma in 1965, the Bronx Kid who demanded equal billing in 1958, the icon destroyed by 1970 lies, the rebel director booed in 1971, and the Broadway spirit who slept in danger in 1964. They didn't all shout and they didn't always win, but each time one of them drew a line, Hollywood's rules shifted a few inches toward justice. What do you make of stars who risk paychecks, prestige, and even safety to confront unfairness? Were they reckless or were they necessary? Tell us in the comments, and if you want more behind-the-scenes Hollywood truths, subscribe so you never miss what's coming next.